This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
It is 6:02, and I will now reopen, since we didn't have volume on before, the February 27th Easthampton Conservation Commission meeting. This meeting is being recorded. Everybody can hear now? Good? Okay. This meeting of the Easthampton Conservation Commission will be conducted in person and simultaneously via remote participation online to the greatest extent possible. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event that we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the City of Easthampton website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. Should an interruption occur in which the online meeting ends abruptly, both the in-person and online meetings will not be restarted, and all agenda items will be automatically continued to the next scheduled meeting. Cassie, you want to read your other announcement?
Yes, this is some general housekeeping for folks who are attending virtually. One, if any technical difficulties occur and the meeting ends abruptly, the hearing will be automatically administratively continued to the March 13th meeting at 6 p.m. and will not resume tonight. Please contact the conservation agent at 413-529-1463 or conservation@easthamptonma.gov for any questions. Two, all participants are asked to remain muted until it is time for public comments. Participants should use the raise hand function or send a chat to the agent. Three, please state your name for the record at the beginning of any comments. Four, please do not utilize the chat function unless it is necessary to indicate to the agent that you would like to make a comment. All private chats are generated into a transcript that will be included in the public record and are not in fact private. Discussion within the chat is prohibited. And with that, we can carry on to the first agenda item.
All right. Are there any public concerns, non-agenda items?
I've not received any, and I don't see if anyone wants to raise their hand if they have a non-agenda item. I do not see.
All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to public hearings. Our first public hearing is continued from January 23rd for a notice of intent filed by Furrow Engineering on behalf of Tasty Top Development, LLC, for a new mixed-use commercial residential development with associated stormwater management system at 93, 95, and 97 Northampton Street at 128 lots 112, 113, and 114. This is Mass DEP file number 1510322. We have any updates, Cassie, and is anyone here to speak to this item tonight?
Did you see that Dawn Abel is here? I don't know if Dawn, there was anything you wanted to say. I got the message about they made a written request to continue the same thing, but I have these documents here in case there's anything that we want to review. But Dawn, if you have anything you'd like to add.
Thank you, Cassie. Don Abel. I was just monitoring the meeting. I'd left that to the client and the arrangement that you've made with him previously. But thank you.
Okay. Yep. No problem. So yeah, I received a written request from the applicant today to continue the meeting until the next 13th. The 13th, correct.
Okay. Is there anything? I know we had requested some additional information, but that's still pending.
Correct.
Okay.
The only thing, there are some written comments from the public that I could read, but I don't know if you want to wait until we continue. And then I don't know if we want to accept any public comments tonight. It's up to you guys, really. The written comments that I have here have already been communicated to the applicant.
Okay. I think it would probably be best to just continue. Yeah, let's not have any discussion if we're gonna have a continuous anyways.
Motion to continue to March 13th at 6 p.m.
Great. Do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, roll call vote. Commissioner Clark?
I just turned to I'll watch the video.
Budget?
Aye.
August?
Aye.
Weeks?
Aye.
Whittemore?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Motion carries. So we will continue until March 13th at 6 p.m.
And who seconded that? I'm sorry.
Gotcha.
Awesome.
All right. Our next order of business is a public meeting for a request for determination of applicability filed by the City of Easthampton, DPW, for new paving of a connection from the bike path to Wamelco Way, map 155, lot 14, Wamelco Way right-of-way. And this request was filed February 21st, 2023. We have someone here to speak to this item, Kathy?
Yep. Diane, you can go ahead.
Hi, I'm Diane Rossini. I'm a staff engineer for the city of Easthampton. We put in a RDA to request, we are planning to pave this informal section connection between Wamelco Way and the current Mahan Trail. I believe Cassie went out there and took some photos if you guys need more of an idea of what it looks like. But currently it is about a 10-foot wide gravel path that we're planning on just excavating that section right there, replacing it with some suitable gravel and paving that section so it's a little bit more of a formal connection between the roadway and the current bike path. And it's about a 10-foot wide to about 70 to 80-foot long section.
And that section is currently sort of paved.
It's like gravel. I mean, go ahead, Diane.
Yeah, it's really just like a compacted gravel section right now. Yeah.
Kathy, do you want to pull up the pictures on the screen?
Yeah, hold on just a second. Okay, let's see. Here it is. There we go. Okay, so these pictures were taken from a parking lot next to Wamelco Way. And this is kind of looking back up towards Main Street. This area that I'm showing is not part of this RDA. That's a project that is exempt from the Wetlands Protection Act because it's all happening within existing roadway, just repaving, that's going to happen in the future. The area in question is just up ahead here. I don't know if you can see that red kind of cone just to the right of this blue car. In the woods here to the right is where it looked like to me that there might be BBWs. It looked wet, so I think it was a fair assumption that this is likely within the 100-foot buffer zone. Kind of a detail. It's not easy to discern that it's wet back there from these images, but that was my assessment when I went out there. So this is probably a good view of the entire area. Diane, is it going to go beyond these two big stones here?
No, well, that's still paved. That's technically paved roadway now, and that's going to be repaved as part of this project.
Okay, I'll keep going then. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so that's the section beyond those like granite blocks is the section in question.
Here's the connection to the bike path here. Quite a bit of detail.
And just to orient everyone, yeah, that's so
better, yeah.
this is 10 is in the distance here, and this is a site I think that we looked at a couple of years ago for a permit. Is that correct?
I
Correct.
want to. So at the top of Wamelco Way, on 14 Main Street, is where the animal hospital is, where stormwater reposition.
I think the one right
yeah.
before
Yep, I think that's right. Yeah, it's just a building right off to the right there.
there's definitely BBW.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just turn it on. Oh. It's my last image here. If anyone wants me to go back, let me know. Questions or comments from things?
Erosion control area on the edge.
Was there a question there? I'm having trouble hearing.
Yeah, I was just wondering what you were planning on doing for erosion control.
Just the basic silt sock. I think it's shown, I included a plan with our submission. So basically around the area in question, we're gonna put silt sock.
Let me pull that up real quick. There we go.
It's kind of hard to see on there, but basically it's gonna follow the property line on the south and then basically hook around the area, the bike path connection that we'd be aiming to pave. And then hooking back into some curbing that's over right near that catch basin shown, and that one will have a silt sack in it.
So we're in buffer zone. It's an area that's already degraded. It's probably largely impervious, even if it's not actually impervious at this point.
Pretty much. Bikes go over it all the time right now, pretty easily.
Yeah, before that, we've done that before. We're just, if you want me to go out and check to make sure the erosion controls are in place, let me know when they're ready and I'll go down the pictures where they start.
Excellent.
Would be work described in our request subject to protection, but will not remove, dredge, or fill. Negative turn 3 is the work described is in the buffer zone, but will not alter an area subject to protection. Therefore, said work does not require the following notice of it. Following of a notice of intent subject to the following conditions, if any.
I just got a request from the chat if we could try to speak up and project, since they're having some trouble hearing. So just generally, I think hopefully that will be sufficient. Garrett, can you guys generally hear us now, like when I speak as well, or is it not at all?
It's much better. Yeah, you guys cut out in the middle there, some of that discussion. It's quiet again. It's very faint, if anything.
There is,
We had success once before, Kathy, pressing buttons on the owl.
Okay. Press some buttons on the owl. Hold on.
We've also noticed buttons.
It's clear in and out occasionally.
This is an enhancing speaker. I don't think we're at the point where we would need to continue the meeting yet.
there you go.
Diane, can you hear us now?
That's much better, yeah.
Better?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
It's hardwired. It's not like this is plugged into the computer. So.
all right. So we were just discussing the options in the form. I think a negative determination type B is what we, or type 3
So type 3,
is what we would want. That is in the buffer zone, but would not alter the area subject to protection. And then we can set any conditions that we want, which so far I think we've discussed.
48 hours notice.
Yep.
Yep.
And erosion controls as shown on the
Yeah.
sketch drawing plan.
Any other conditions? I think that should be all we would need at this location.
So I'll move to issue a negative determination type 3 that the work is within a buffer zone, but will not alter the associated resource area, provided that the erosion controls are used as shown in the drawing, and that 48 hours of notice is given to the conservation agent prior to construction.
Second.
So-
Go ahead, just
Roll call vote. All those in favor, Carr?
Aye.
Fletcher?
Aye.
August?
Aye.
Weeks?
Aye.
Whittemore?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Motion carries. If you give us just a moment, we'll finish our form and signatures.
Pass one of them jelly beans down here. There you got the whole bowl.
Kathy, I'm gonna mark hand delivery for tomorrow.
That sounds good. Yeah, Diane, I'll give it to you tomorrow.
Great.
and I'll get-
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joe?
I want to know if there's an unclaimed chocolate heart.
Oh, chocolate heart. Just one.
It's not even a pen.
And now, plan.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not going to use my princess pencil.
A long time since it's actually completed an action and signed something.
No.
Check something off the list.
Before I could ask that fast.
They told me the other day that they have a requirement to issue permits in 60 days. I laughed at them.
They
They said they're never able to, but that is what is in their official regulations.
They asked me one last question in September about something. And I was like, okay, we're all set now. And I was like, okay. So I just kind of like checked it off on my mental list.
Yeah.
And then we're actually out to bid now. And I was like, where's the court permit? I'm like,
Here.
they haven't issued it yet, have they? Oh, gosh. It's like shocking. I was sure that they'd issued it, but I guess.
Yeah. All right. Next up. Our next order of business are requests for certificate of compliance. We have one for One Industrial Lofts LLC, 1 Ferry Street, Mass DEP file number 1510298 for track 1 of the mill redevelopment project, map 135/131, lot 2/1.
Okay. So this file is huge. It has track 2 in there too, if you need it, but it might be easier to pull some stuff up on. And this is the as-built on top. Great. I believe we have some folks online here for the item.
So Kathy, this will be, remind me how we had this set up. Will this be a partial?
So
Is it all under one permit or was it 2?
So it's, if I may, for the applicant, there's actually 3 permits for this, for 1 Ferry Street. One is for the slope project that was
Yeah.
recently permitted, just the slope. Then there are 2, one for each track
Okay,
of the redevelopment project itself.
that's what I couldn't remember.
This request though is also for a partial for track 1,
Okay,
which the applicant will explain, when we get in there. So
okay.
I think that's the best way to do it.
Who do we have to speak for this?
Hello, everyone. This is Ryan Nelson from R. Levesque Associates. Cassie, that is correct. So tonight we are applying for a partial certificate of compliance for tract 1. All the site work is completed. However, there is still some building components ongoing for building number 7 immediately adjacent to the canal. The reason we're requesting a partial is there are some residential units for the rest of the site that we wish to release from this order of conditions so those can get closed out and occupied and all the legal matters associated with that. So I believe there was a site visit, Cassie, my boss, Rob Levesque, and the owner, Mike Michon. were out there last week, and there are no issues that I'm aware of.
Cassie, do you want to speak to the site visit?
Yeah, so, Jay, Ryan, and I were there at the site visit with, as just, Brian Nelson just explained. But essentially, yes, what we were looking at was for track one, all of the disturbed areas have been secured, with vegetation or paving. While stormwater system is complete, there's a stormwater permit associated with this as well. The only thing that's not complete is building 7. And it was explained to me that building 7 would not require ground disturbance to do the work within, but they felt it was prudent to not close out the order of conditions in its entirety because there is still that building 7, despite there not being any more ground disturbance work and the site essentially being stabilized in its entirety for track 1.
Where's the?
And building 7 is the one,
Along the
it's
canal.
shown as lot 1B on the asphalt.
I'm not sure. I have to
West.
look.
Or I guess all of this is shown as lot
It's on
1B.
the other side of the canal, right?
Yeah, let me share my screen here.
1A, 1C. Looking on the west side of the canal.
Correct. West side of the canal, the building parallel to the west side of the canal.
So as I recall, I remember having a discussion when we were permitting this about the protections that were going to be in place for the canal. So all of that work, I'm assuming, is still to come.
So the work inside the canal or any kind of cleaning.
We had talked about sort of nets to catch things that might fall into the canal while they're doing construction.
My understanding is that's all associated with track 2. Any work that would be within the canal. So I don't know.
Ryan, can you speak to that?
Yep. So any aerial work on the building with a potential risk, obviously those nets or anything required to be in place. So that is still ongoing, yes.
Okay. And what about materials stockpiling? Where on the site will that still be occurring?
I don't believe there will be any stockpiling other than new building materials getting delivered. And my assumption would be that would be within the paved parking areas.
Okay. And so you, can you, with the graphic up, speak more specifically to which areas you're looking to have the partial certificate issued for?
Yes. So if you see there's an outline that says 4-story, I think. I don't know how I expand it here on my screen, but yes, that building right there, that is building number 7 that is still under construction in terms of structural components.
And so you're looking to have the certificate issued for everything west of there?
Correct, yes.
So that lot 1B, it looks like there's a property line pretty close to that building, within 20 feet or so. Is that the property line basically that is associated with lot 1B where that building 7 is?
I believe it is along the canal, which segments the 2 parcels or the 2 projects. Give me 1 second. Let me check my map here.
We're referring, Ryan, to the dashed line that runs between the buildings aren't numbered on here, but the building that has the parking beneath the apartments and the building that's still to come. There's a dashed line.
I see, yes. So lot 1A would be west of that property line. Lot 1B is the building we're requesting to keep under the order conditions. So I guess you could reference it as that. That would work.
Yeah, that seems like the cleanest thing to specify where we're issuing the certificate for is if we issue it for lot 1A and 1C.
Correct.
For the
Yep.
areas within those.
Yep, that works.
Is this included in lot 1A?
Yes.
That's how I'm reading it.
Yeah, this all is lot 1A. This is 1C, I would say.
Yep.
And Cassie, you said the stormwater is complete for the entire tract 1.
That's my understanding. And Ryan, you can confirm. But yeah, that was my understanding, is that it's been completed.
That's correct, yes.
And is there anything specific that needs to be referenced in the partial certificate relative to the legal issues you were discussing?
Just something along the lines that work, has all site work on the property has been completed along with buildings except for building number 7 immediately adjacent to the canal.
Other questions or comments from the commission?
I had a question, if I can, about reporting. But they don't need to do any more reporting if the order isn't completely closed out. Could this partial certificate of compliance serve to relieve them of that requirement since the site is stable?
Everything's paved and all the other areas are stable.
Is there anything along the back? Well, I guess
Along the
that
rail
would still
trail,
be included in the order.
That's the separate,
Yeah.
that's the separate
Yeah, that's a
project.
track.
That's simple.
But there's nothing along the rail trail for lot 1A that's needs to be completed.
I can show you the images if you'd like, but it looks good.
it was pretty
Yeah.
stable, yeah.
Are there still protections in place on the catch basins for the construction work that will be ongoing?
There are no, as far as I understand, no catch basin, silt sacks on the catch basins now. There is a wattle still in catch basin that's at the base of the slope for the
That's
other
kinda-
project.
For the other
Yes,
project?
and
Yes,
controlled
yes.
along the canal where, any kind of stormwater would have reached down there.
Probably have a picture of that
I do, yeah.
somewhere.
Are there any concerns that there's still gonna be construction materials stockpiled in the parking, in the paved areas? Is there a need for continued protection on the storm system?
Well, they're gonna be demolishing parts of building 7, Ryan, with like lots
I
of brick
believe so.
dust.
From my understandings from Mr. Michon, the building is being reinforced in place. They weren't demoing it or knocking it down. So I don't see any large amounts of material being demoed or scattered about the site, so no.
And, what do we have for structures in that area?
Those are the stormwater bricks.
So it looks like there are several catch basins that are still within that lot 1B. So I think if we release lot 1A and 1C, that would not necessarily release the need to monitor anything that might be going on in lot 1B that could potentially impact the storm system or, allow debris to enter the storm system.
So other thing that I was able to receive or that the applicant sent along is that they submitted for their, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, their termination of their CGP with the construction general permit, and it was approved, or as far as I understand it. I think I printed the email, it's in that folder, I can pull it up if you like. Brian, is that correct? Do I have it?
Yes, I believe my coworker Alex was handling that, and I believe she did terminate the SWIP since the site was stabilized. So, but obviously, if the commission feels the need to ongoing monitoring of those catch basins under your local bylaw, we're happy to do that if necessary.
Okay, I didn't know how that factored in.
Remind me what the status of the stormwater permit for this site is. I assume there's a separate one from the order of conditions.
It was an attachment to the order condition, attachment C.
Okay. So they got filed together, and there's was the city holding a bond still?
Correct.
Okay.
So, yes.
And that's also separate for track 1 versus track 2.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. So we are not necessarily releasing that.
I guess that's up for the commission to determine if they would feel like it's appropriate to release the bond, having not issued a full certificate of compliance or not. It's related to the stormwater system, so if you feel that the stormwater system is, I don't know how that
Well,
relates.
it's like 4 of the cases, but in the lot that they're still working on.
All the bases are done and everything's paid, right?
Well, so is the applicant requesting a release of the bond?
I believe so.
Yeah, I would think that if, yeah, I don't know if it's been explicitly said, but I would anticipate that they would prefer that.
Can we ask him?
Yeah, Brian, do you know if they're requesting a release of the bond as well,
Yeah.
associated with stormwater permit?
Yes, that would be obviously desired, but I understand, if you need to withhold some back, we're, happy with a partial also.
So the stormwater system is done, right? And it's just, that's really what the bond is for, to make sure that it's not like if the project should not be.
If they left town and left it open, it's not open.
Right.
It's closed up. It's paid.
What, can you remind us of what the storm system consists of in terms of treatment? Do we have that on another sheet here perhaps?
I don't know if it would be on that sheet. Ryan, I don't know if you can speak to that. Otherwise, I can try to find it in the digital file.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'll have to pull up the design plans. Hold on.
And do we have detailed as-built of that storm system? So we can't release it without that. These look like they're all the same. Are these all the same sheets?
There
Am I
may be
missing
multiple
something?
copies for commissioners to take.
Okay.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember how much stormwater
I
work.
don't either.
My guess is that impervious cover did not really change that much on the site. Maybe some of it would be, some of the stormwater system would be reused, but it's been a really long time and we just don't remember.
Here's pictures from the site if anyone's interested.
I guess I'm also
Based
trying to
on,
understand. Oh, let him go.
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you should answer the question that's on the table. Go ahead, Brian.
Just refreshing my memory here with the stormwater drainage plans. Since the majority of the site was previously developed, we upgraded a lot of the catch basins with water quality units. And we were utilizing existing drainage points into the canal.
So there are water quality treatment units that were installed?
Correct, yes.
Because I'm not seeing those on your as-built, and so we need to have those included before we can release the stormwater system. Am I missing them, Jan?
I have not noticed one yet.
That's the plan.
They may not be specifically called out by, leader label on the as-built plan. Some of the drainage manholes just have a drainage manhole symbol, but they're not specified. But we do have all the inverts and information on that. It was just very busy if we put it all on the plan, but
Cassie, do you have the pictures that we can see up on the
Yes.
screen?
Yes, hold on a second. Okay. All right, let me share it in here quick. Okay, this is the site visit images from February 22nd. This image is looking towards Ferry Street. That's building 3 there. And then we're just kind of looking over here. Let's see here. This is in between building 5 and building 7, which is not yet completed on the right there.
Definitely does not look completed.
Nope. Some of these images are from inside building 7. It's gonna jump around a little. That's from inside.
That's inside which building?
Building 7. Oh. This is looking at the canal. Building 7 is, you can't really see it, but I'm taking a picture from outside the window of building 7. So track 2 is basically the majority of this image.
What is that? Is that a pipe or is that stabilization?
No, so maybe it's missed it.
Now we're back outside again. So building 7 would be to the left of this image. Building 5 is behind. Ferry Street would be ahead on the other side of that fencing. Building 7 there, partially in view. Just looking at building 3. The start of the bike path area to the right.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
So when we went to the original site visit where the bike path areas, I know there's a huge canopy of trees they were gonna remove. And weren't they gonna put plantings there?
So that's not what you're seeing here.
It
It's a
isn't.
different area. That's going to
Okay.
be the subject of the next certificate of
That's-
compliance, but those images aren't
Okay.
included here. So you'll see that area has also been stabilized.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little farther down the hill,
Around the corner.
around the corner
Oh,
here, yeah.
Cassie, if you could go back to that last photo,
Yes.
you're looking at the site plans here. You see that catch basin or the drainage manhole right there in the center? That is a water quality unit. That's a CDS inline by Contech. On the as-built, it's called out as just a drainage manhole, but that is a hydrodynamic water separator, and that's kind of the last collection point before it discharges to the canal. So all the stormwater on the site goes to that water separator before going to the canal.
We should get that on the as-built.
Yeah, we'll need to have that on the as-built, Brian.
Okay.
And the other thing I'm looking for is whether we have operation and maintenance plan on file already.
Yeah, I'll have to check with Mike on that. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to attend tonight.
Okay.
He was handling that, so.
I'm not seeing it, but there's a lot of papers in my stack here for the file, so it may be most efficient for you to supply it again if it already exists.
Okay.
Oh, maybe this is construction period.
Is there anything else besides the monitoring and the stormwater permit for the order of conditions that we would be releasing?
So that is a good question. I can pull up the order of conditions, and typically there will be a section that describes either in perpetuity or post-construction and or post-construction requirements. So I can, if it's hard to navigate with these images, people agree with that, I can find that.
Okay, I did find what was submitted with the application for the long-term maintenance plan. For the CDS unit, it just says as specified by the manufacturer. So if we could have the specific inspection and maintenance schedule for that incorporated into the plan, that would be helpful. And is Mike Michon maintaining control and maintenance in perpetuity, or what's going to be going on with the maintenance of this site in the future?
I'd have to defer to Mike. I don't know the answer to that, unfortunately.
Okay, because I think that's something that is also specified in the stormwater permit that we need to know who is going to be responsible for maintenance going forward if it's not the current owner.
Okay.
And let me see, the order of petitions. Good.
And I'm not honestly sure if there's any other requirements. We haven't signed off on a stormwater permit in quite a while. Does anybody else recall? We might have to do a little behind the scenes checking.
Okay.
Yeah, I can take a closer look. Okay,
But I think those would be the main concerns, Ryan, are associated with closing out the stormwater permit, making sure we have all of the right pieces and paperwork in hand.
Okay. Yeah, we can get you all of that. That's no problem.
Other questions or comments from the commission?
I was just asking what else was on the order of conditions besides
yes.
the monitoring and stormwater
so I have the order of conditions pulled up here for this track.
that we
And-
might want to consider about letting go, what we're letting go.
So, post-construction requirements are, submitting the form, a letter from a qualified environmental professional certifying that the property in this order and detailing any deviations that exist, their potential effect on the project. Statement that work is substantial compliance with no detailing of deviations from non-accepted as-built plans, which include the wetland resource areas, location, and elevations of all stormwater management conveyances, structures, and best management design, including foundation drains and culverts, as well as distances from any structures constructed under this order to wetland resources. And a line delineating the limit of work, wetland resource, or any wetland resource replication, restoration, or enhancement areas, including areas of invasive species management. That's all should be on the as-built, and then post-construction photographs. We have this lead. For in perpetuity conditions, stabilized slope shall be maintained as designed and constructed. Pesticide, herbicides, fungicides, and fertilizers shall not be used within the 100-foot buffer zone. 100-foot buffer zone. Organic pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, and fertilizers may be used subject to the review and approval of commission. Native plant species, only native plant, non-invasive plant species may be planted on site. Seed mixes shall not consist of, so also consist of 100% native, non-invasive species. Dumping prohibited. There should be no dumping of leaves, grass clippings, brush, other debris into wetland resource areas or the 100-foot buffer zone. Additional alteration prohibited. No additional alteration without review by the commission. And then non-native invasive plant species monitoring and management, continued monitoring and management of non-native and or invasive plant species on site to prevent the spread of non-native and or invasive plant species within the project area, including but not limited to the stormwater basin. Let's see, stormwater permit. This will take me a second. I have to read to see if it's not organized in the same way.
Cassie, I'm looking at it too.
Cool.
I found the copy. Has Dan Murphy, the city engineer, inspected the system yet?
No,
Because that is a requirement
Okay.
also for release of the stormwater permit,
I see.
or at least for release of the bond.
I can coordinate with him, Ryan, and keep you in the loop.
Okay.
And do we have, I'm not seeing it in the application. Do we have a letter stamped by the engineer noting any deviations from the original plan?
Is it the first? Not sure.
There's nothing stamped here.
Stamped.
No, we didn't submit any stamped affidavit, but we could do that, certainly.
Okay, that'd be great. And Cassie, the bond amount that's referenced in here is 186,000. I don't think, maybe, would I have track 2 in this file too?
Yes. I have gone, if I have.
I want to confirm that those are really separate.
That's a good question. What I have in my file here is a bond for 186,000
For,
track 1.
do you have any notes on what it would be for track 2 to confirm that it's not listed as the same amount?
Let me open that permit. It should be in that order of conditions, so hold on. Open here. The bond amount referenced for track 2 is 141,000.
Okay, so they're definitely separate. Good.
And the submittal of the bond is a pre-construction requirement, so it makes sense to me that we don't have the track 2 one yet.
Okay,
They would
that
submit
makes
that
sense.
with
Yeah, you're right.
pre-construction for track 2.
You're right. And I think I do recall that we split them in part for that reason.
I see.
Okay. So, any questions, Ryan, on what we still need?
No, I understand all those. We'll work on getting that to you. No problem.
Excellent. I think that's it. Any further comments? All right.
Do we need a motion to continue? That's sort of remember for requests.
I don't think so.
We don't need a formal motion to continue now because it's not a hearing per se.
Right.
All right. Thanks for the flip. I'll give you all of these back. It's all with that. As did this. And sorry.
Yeah, you can take it back upstairs.
Yeah.
We break them.
For the truck.
All right, so our next order of business is a request for certificate of compliance for the City of Easthampton, 1 Industrial Box, 1 Ferry Street, Mass DEP file number 1510317 for slope grading, vegetation management, and stormwater basin, map 131/135, lot 1/2 and 250. And Ryan, I assume you are here to speak to this as well?
Yes, that's correct. So after the NOI for track 1 and track 2, Mr. Michon wanted to clean up a bike trail or the slope adjacent to the bike trail north of building 7. And rather than amending your conditions, we determined it was a different geographical area. There wasn't really much overlap, so we filed a new notice of intent to clean up a lot of compromised vegetation and trash and unstable slope north of that building 7 between the bike trail. So all the vegetation there was removed, and slope was loamed, seeded, and is stable. And as part of that, we incorporated a small stormwater basin at the base of that hill just to help attenuate some of the stormwater prior to discharging to the canal through that same underground stormwater piping.
I don't know if you guys want to see images first of that area.
Yep.
Is this the area?
Yeah.
I was
Yes,
asking
that's what we
about.
asked about earlier.
All right.
Okay. Building 3 is here in the corner there. Extends this is the retaining wall. It extends over basically to building 5. Now we're approaching the area of the slope that was stabilized. Okay. So everywhere you see these kind of green structures is where they have a planting.
Planting this.
What did they plant doing?
We have it.
I think we had a schedule somewhere.
Yeah, I don't remember, but it was all specified.
Yeah.
I don't know, Ryan, do you know what they planted off the top of your head?
Yes, it was, let's see here, a mix of serviceberry, dogwoods, birches, and witch hazel is what was specified.
And what year was that done and planted?
I believe this was done during the growing season last year.
Did the grass come up okay and
Looks like it.
the plants are?
It looked like it.
Okay. It's hard to tell in the pictures.
I know,
Yeah,
yeah, there's a
that's it.
little bit of snow on the ground, making it look a little harder to tell. I can zoom in if that's.
Oh, yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, it does look better.
Yeah, it was stable.
Yep.
To the point where they don't need that sock around that basin, right?
I think that, I agree.
And they took out all those invasive vines that were growing in the trees along the bike path.
It's my understanding.
It looked pretty good. We'll see what happens in the next growing season, what takes over, what comes back.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh. So bike path there up above.
So the retaining wall ends, it's not gonna be continued along there.
Mhm. Ryan, I don't know if you can speak to that, but there's not plans to extend the retaining wall any farther, correct?
That's correct. No plans to extend.
So Ryan, the as-built that we have in front of us appears to be the same one that we just had for track 1. Am I missing something, or are we looking at the right thing?
That's correct. We combined it all into one plan.
Okay. So I'm not sure how others on the commission feel about this, but the plan that we had to permit this is on a much tighter scale, and all of the individual planting locations were shown, whereas we're not seeing that on this one that's zoomed out to show the whole site. Are folks comfortable with that, or do we want to see the level of detail that matches what was submitted for the application?
I'd like to see. I mean, is that what this is? Tree.
Not as detailed as this.
Yeah, but this one this is kind of fuzzy because it's the small version, but it looks like there's about twice as many plantings shown as what are shown on the as-built.
Mhm.
Yeah, that seems important.
Maybe we should have,
And as planted,
as planted as,
that
Because we did have several conversations about that. Do we know how many they planted?
We don't.
Ryan, do you know how many trees were actually planted?
I don't have the total count in front of me, but I believe it was supposed to be somewhere around, I think 24 was the original number.
Okay. And the as-bilt's only showing 10, so I think we do need to see some additional detail of this area to document that what was proposed was actually completed.
Sure. I think on the as-built, we were showing the trees and not the shrubs. They were on a different layer just so you could read it. Otherwise, they were all jumbled. But with a plan with a blown up scale, we can depict that better.
That would be helpful. And again, we're going to need a signed stamped letter indicating any deviations from the plan.
Okay.
I think, Cassie, did you see any other conditions that we would need to address? Those were the ones that stuck out at me.
I agree. Hold on. Let me see.
I can just catch again. I was also curious in one of the pictures that showed the canal, the the slope goes right down to the canal, and then there doesn't seem to be anything between where the dirt ends and it. And I just was curious if that was in the order of conditions, since I wasn't here then, to have any kind of thing to stop soil from just running into the
So
water besides the plantings.
maybe helpful to bring that picture back up.
Yeah, I think so.
Make sure I know the area you're talking about here.
Right there.
Yep, so they didn't do any, what was the work? The work that was done right over the channel here was different than the work that happened on the rest of the slope. Correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, my understanding was that there was just vegetation management there. There wasn't any grading or anything that happened in that location. Is that correct?
That's correct. So immediately adjacent to that head wall, you can see some of those trees were remaining because we didn't want to compromise that old culvert there. So it was just brush, and some smaller trees were cut flush to grade. And then it was stopped at the eastern side of that head wall, so where you see that silt fence.
I don't know, it just looks to me like the dirt could just sort of run off right into the canal, but without the slope.
Yeah, kind of hard to tell from the picture. There's a lot of leaf litter, but from what I remember, I didn't see any scouring or risk of erosion there.
I think that's the way it was. Okay.
And what I remember too is that there was no like extra plantings or work hosed there. So that was essentially what was there before.
Brian, again, the copy of the proposed plan that we have in front of us is small and fuzzy, but there's an indication of retaining wall to be removed, and it's not clear from the as-built. There's certainly still a concrete retaining wall labeled on here. Are those different walls? Was the wall removed as planned?
Yes, so I don't know, Cassie, if one of your photos, yeah, looks like that one you just passed may have shown it. That general area there, I believe there was like an old kind of concrete rubble wall that was removed. It's not the same as the one that goes underneath the bike trail.
Okay.
I can probably get a picture that shows, oh, here we go.
It's better.
How's that, Ryan?
Yeah, that's good. So it was somewhere in here, kind of in line with those trees that are recently planted.
Okay. Yeah, so I think those are my only concerns, just a clearer plan and the signed stamped letter indicating any deviations.
Okay, yep, we can do that.
Sounds good to me.
All right. Thank you.
No, thanks, Ryan.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
All right, Cassie. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, moving on to enforcement actions. Cassie, do we have updates on any of these?
Only for 19 Northampton Street.
Okay.
So I did receive a message from the applicant for the NOI project. Basically, an overview. At the last meeting, the commission left it that there still needs to determine what the plan is with the unpermitted crossing and the restoration associated with it. The commission basically was willing to entertain two different ideas. One would be for the applicant to submit a separate new NOI just for the building of the bridge. And that way they could presumably go through that NOI process and complete that in a timely enough manner that the commission would be acceptable to leave the unpermitted crossing for now, so they could use that to build it and then restore it all as restricted plan. The other alternative the commission said they were willing to consider would be to increase the area of restoration associated with removing the unpermitted crossing, so that there was more than what is required for restoration, essentially, but likely creating more BBW than was there before. So not just restoring it to what it was, but expanding. But the commission didn't determine how much of that they wanted or anything, if you wanted to hear a proposal from them. So what they were able to provide with me is this explanation here. It says, the applicant is proposing to increase the restoration area at the crossing location by 30% over what was originally proposed in GZA's restoration narrative. This would be an increase of total restored footprint as well as the number of plants. The original restoration area was approximately 120 to 150 square feet. So we would propose a new area of 165 to 195 square feet. If acceptable to the commission, we can provide an updated formal restoration narrative from GZA to include this. And thank you, this is from Brian Golicki with Borough Engineering. So I guess curious to see Fish's thoughts on that proposal.
So am I understanding correctly that they're offering an increase of 40 square feet roughly of BBW in exchange for leaving an unpermitted bridge in place for what could be 2 years?
I don't think anyone else from the project is here to speak to it, but that's my understanding.
That is not what I had in mind.
Okay. Is there additional guidance I can give them? Do you guys feel like do you have an idea of what the right number would be? And if you don't, obviously, or
we're looking
for the NOI.
For a substantial increase in improvement over existing conditions if they want to be able to delay this timeline further than they already have.
Okay, let me just get here.
They're pervasive about the site with the resource area.
It was discussed briefly at the last meeting, though I don't think a formal assessment has been completed. Danny, you would be able to speak better to that than I would, but I know at the last meeting he said seemed to be that indicated that there weren't extensive invasives, but I'm not sure.
I wonder, I noticed that Garrett Stover from Pascomet Conservation Trust is on the line. I wonder if you have any knowledge of the invasives in that, I think you know the area that we're talking about, the corridor that runs along that, the stream kind of below the 93 Northampton site. It may not actually be on.
Oh, he said, this is in the chat. It was
Okay.
indicated that I haven't felt trespassing was appropriate on the site, so.
Do you have any sense from the adjacent conservation areas of what the status of invasives is?
Okay, let's see.
Lots of invasives at Dwyer Conservation Area.
That's about
Yes,
as good.
which is on the other
Yeah.
side.
Want the list?
It's on the other side of the.
You do.
You could give us a sense, sure. Would you
Carter?
announce yourself, please, for the record?
I'm Marty Klein, 7 Stone Path Lane.
Yeah.
Board member of Pascomet Conservation Trust. So the faces there are garlic mustard, barberry, Japanese knotweed. I think there's some black swallowwort, of course.
Of course.
Bittersweet.
That's what comes to mind.
Okay.
But there may be others.
Yeah, so assuming that there's probably similar conditions following up that adjacent corridor, one thing they might consider would be a more thorough assessment of invasives and a proposal to contribute to an invasives management effort in a significant way.
Okay.
But we welcome their creativity as well. All right, no other enforcement action updates?
Not that I have.
Okay. Moving on to open space updates, anything on Echodale West?
No updates for Echodale.
All right, compliance updates, which projects do we have information on tonight, Kathy?
Yes, the first one would be the National City of Easthampton, item 8C, I believe. National Farms Vegetation Management.
Great.
Oh, I don't know if for the enforcement items, can they make comments or?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we can. Sure.
Take a comment on 93, 95, and 97. Okay. Marty Klein, 7 Stonehenge Lane. So I've been thinking about, this is an anticipated ecological impacts from this project. That I don't think they're going to fall under the regulatory umbrella, but I think that it's something that we should be concerned about. So I'm not sure what the what they say the total, when it's fully built out, I think you're saying maybe 2.5 people per unit. So we're talking maybe 500 people.
Marty, actually, I need to interrupt for a minute. I thought this was a comment related to the enforcement order, but if it's related to the project as a whole, we need to be in an open hearing session.
Sorry.
I apologize. If you could submit it, you can either submit it in writing or we continue that until the 13th. Thank you. We just need to be mindful of the open meeting law requirement there. All right, so getting back then to National Lake Pond update.
Yes, okay. So, the commission previously approved a minor change to this order of conditions that included the application of barley straw bags throughout the pond as a potential effort to try to reduce the occurrence of cyanobacteria within the pond. They did one application of that and they provided their results. They'd like to do it again. And I was realizing that the minor change that was approved by the commission did not include repeat applications. So they would like to get approval to keep doing that each year and monitoring and sharing that data with the commission. That they found that the first one seemed to be successful, but they need more data to determine if that was the cause or not. Just as a quick recap, the plan is slightly modified from the last request for minor change. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Let's see. I don't know if you want, I can read this letter. But essentially what they'd like to do is they'd like to decrease the amount of barley straw in each bag and add an additional 6 sites of deployment. So more bags generally, but each bag's gonna be less full. My understanding from this letter is that they think that it'll help with better decomposition if they lessen the amount in the bags.
Okay.
And then there's a map here of where they'd like to deploy it. I don't know if people are interested in seeing the data they've acquired for this. I can zoom in if you want. But.
Is this just the general data or was this specific to the barley straw?
This is specific to the barley straw. I have this printed out too.
Yeah, they just added some other sites that they wanted to try.
How many sites were
It's
there
like
first?
it's like 3 more than before.
You should be
8
able to.
originally maybe, but maybe more because it's like multiple on multiple sheets here.
I never actually saw the installations. Did you all see what they looked like?
I was
I did see
thinking, but I
them
didn't know
all,
what they were. So I wasn't here when they were.
Oh, yes, before your time.
Yeah. I was wondering what those were.
Yeah, but it's because it's multiple sheets. There's more than 3.
So which are the new proposals, the one in red?
The red ones.
Red ones are new. But there's other pages, so you have to go to the next, drawing to, there's nothing on that, but then the following one has 3 more sites on that page also.
And then here's what they look like. But less full, I suppose, because they're.
So this is it while they've been there for a while.
I don't know how long these have been.
Yeah,
in
they look
place.
like those are the ones that have been there a while.
This is the original proposal, so. I'm curious about.
I have no concerns with continuing or adding additional. I know the one thing we had talked about people being worried that people might think it was trash and remove them.
Mhm.
Presumably they didn't have that issue. I see they put up the sign saying do not remove. Did they say, Cassie, if they had any issues with people tampering with them or?
No, they didn't, and,
I'm being curious just to follow up just out of, just for information purposes. Not because it would influence what we do here.
all I can say is that in this letter, he does, make a point, this letter is from Gary Golis, who's been my main point of contact for this project, and, he noted he was not able to attend because of a personal family matter, but, that did not know what the aesthetics would be going to be, but I have to say they blended in well. Can't see an issue with adding 6 bags. It's not for me to determine, but his assessment seemed to be that they blended in well, and I didn't get any notification of any issue with them.
Great. Does anybody have any questions or concerns?
No concerns.
Yeah.
No
All right, so we're happy to allow that to continue.
So what I would plan to do is I will issue another minor change approval, but this time say that it can be repeated into the future.
Yeah, for as long as the permit is in place.
Oh, yeah,
I
as
would
long
say.
as the permit's in place. Does the commission want to stipulate that they share the data, or?
I think that's already part of the
Okay.
permit. We should be good.
Yeah, that permit expires next spring anyway.
Yeah, so maybe I'll also just remind them that if they want to extend it, they'll need to do that by March 25th, it looks like. Like I said, next spring, like.
Next spring,
Oh,
it's
next,
like
you meant next spring.
24.
Sorry, they've got a year.
Got a
They've
year.
got a year.
Okay.
In my mind, next spring was like
Like
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Yeah, I was shocked.
No, this
I know, but I was gonna make a joke about that, but now I see that I just misheard.
yeah.
All right, what else, Kathy?
Fun fact,
That was it for,
Gary was on the Concom for like a
For a
day
long time.
when I was,
Oh, I thought a long
we
time.
overlapped.
Oh,
Maybe it was like a year, but he was on for a long time
yeah.
back in the day.
He used to be the chair at some point, right? Or am I
I
misremembering
don't
that?
think so.
No, okay.
Not that I
I've seen his
remember.
name on many
Yeah.
minutes from many days past.
Yeah. Our
Uh,
next spring.
okay, what else do I have here?
Tomorrow.
6973 Loudville, if we're done with the Barley Straw. Oh, do we need to make motion to issue that minor change?
I'll move to issue a minor change approval for additional barley straw bags that are
Second.
smaller.
The second roll call vote, all those in favor, Carr,
Aye.
Patrick,
Aye.
August,
Aye.
Weeks,
Aye.
Whittemore, Ryan,
I
motion carried.
Awesome.
Thank you, Kathy.
Okay, no problem. So next item is item 8K that I have an update for. This is
Yep.
6973 Loudville Road. I did do a follow-up site visit. The commission had requested that they do application of seed, and they requested that we do a site visit to determine exactly where we wanted that to happen. I did that with Commissioner Ryan on the 16th.
no idea.
Yes, on the 16th, February 16th, and then they notified me on the 20th that they had completed that work, that seeding, and I was able to conduct the site visit on the 22nd, all of February, and from what I could tell, they did complete the seeding. Seeding was in place, the seed was there, so now it's just carry on monitoring until the spring, it sounds like.
Okay, and now, of course, we have snow coming for
Yeah.
winter to start after no
But
winter.
it's gonna be 50 degrees on Thursday, so who knows?
Is it really?
48,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well, we'll see what it does.
Before the next 10 inches come.
Spring snow,
Yeah.
it's good for
So, so we'll, Kathy, if you could just make a note to see what the weather's doing, and if there's been any conditions that might suggest an opportunity for germination, if you could go check on it.
Yes, okay.
Thank you.
I will, they're doing SWIP reporting, I can ask them to make note of that in their reporting as well, if they see signs of pollution.
Yeah.
Cool. And anything else? That was it for ongoing projects, and if we're ready, we can move to general business.
All right, general business, meeting minutes from February 13th.
Wasn't able to get them done.
Okay, so we'll punt those till the next time. Wetlands ordinance discussion.
Yeah, so I don't know if you all are feeling up to it. If you
We
are.
are feeling up to it. We promised we would do this time so that we could have our next meeting on the 6th.
I have a copy here for everybody of the draft. I can pull it up on the screen. And basically,
Pass around.
if I may, there was, how many? 4? Really, there were 3 questions that were asked about explicitly that the committee had determined that they would like to get the commission's opinion on. And then, of course, if there's anything else in their review that they were curious about or concerned about.
So Cassie, do you want to point us
Yes.
to those 3 questions?
Yeah, so. Oh, I would love to give a copy to myself. Hold on just a second. Bearings here.
Our last meeting on February 6th, probably.
I think so, yeah.
This upcoming meeting.
Hold on, yeah.
So, and I think Cassie said this in the email she sent when she distributed this. Keep in mind that we haven't touched the regulations yet, and a lot of the detail will be there. So the ordinance is meant to be simple, basics that will be hopefully approved and made official by city council at some point in the future when we're ready to present it. And then the regulations are easier to amend. So that's where we would have more of the specific details regarding fees and penalties and things like that, that might need to change over time so that they're keeping up with, inflation and whatever else.
The first question that the committee had identified was whether the commission would like to add protections for ponds of any size or set a minimum size for jurisdiction for ponds. Currently in the Wetlands Protection Act, it's anything over 10,000 square feet, I believe.
Yep.
Is within the jurisdiction of the commission, but under is not. And actually, if you want mine, I'm going to grab my copy because it has like notes on it.
Yeah.
If you help.
And the MAC model ordinance suggests ponds of any size, but as we began thinking about that, we weren't sure if that got into essentially permitting around puddles, which we did not want to
Right.
do. So our discussion kind of turned to whether there was a middle ground that we wanted to set in terms of square footage, or if we were content with ponds being the 10,000 square feet that they are in the Wetlands Protection Act, because we then have additional protections that will be embedded into the ordinance for vernal pools and isolated wetlands.
Okay.
So this language around the 400 square feet that's crossed out, that's about vernal pools, not
Correct.
And these are specifically ponds that don't have
Connections.
a stream going in or out. Or-
I don't know if it's already been said. I think the applicable portion of the draft is under definitions / jurisdiction. It kind of comes up in both.
That is correct. The pond would be the water body in its own right.
Oh, I think there's some middle ground. That was what's it was about
10,000 square feet is basically
a yard.
a quarter acre.
Yeah.
So it's 100 by 100.
It's pretty big.
Yes.
In the case of Highland Ave years ago, we didn't really ever figure out how big that pond was. Right, but that was a pond that got filled.
Right, that's correct.
Middle bank.
For an isolated wetland of some type.
Yeah, I
But
guess
it was more of a pond.
yeah, these ones at, that we're kind of dealing with now, those are the same thing, right? More or less. Or some of them had water most of the year, as far as you know, or were they depressions?
I think they were more like vernal pools that filled up seasonally.
Mhm.
Here we go. What is, I can find the official definition of pond again. I think. Where are the definitions? Don't see. There we go. The official WPA definition is any open body of fresh water with a surface area observed or recorded within the last 10 years of at least 10,000 square feet, may be either naturally occurring or human-made by impoundment, excavation, or otherwise. Ponds shall contain standing water except for periods of extended drought. So they have to be wet all the time unless you're in a serious drought. And then notwithstanding the above, the following human-made bodies of water shall not be considered ponds, basins or lagoons, which are part of wastewater treatment plants, swimming pools or other impervious human-made basins, and individual gravel pits or quarries excavated from upland areas unless inactive for 5 or more consecutive years. And we did talk about, we thought that that was important, the impervious human-made basins, because one of the things we talked about of having ponds of any size was wanting to make sure we weren't going to be trying to take jurisdiction over somebody's little like fish pond in their backyard, but that would have an impervious liner, so that would be out of the question regardless.
Okay.
I think I raised questions about retention ponds and basins, if that falls under a definition or not.
If they are properly maintained and part of a stormwater system, then no, they are not jurisdictional. They're part of a stormwater system.
Was in their jurisdiction. Still fine. Yeah. Aren't they?
Well, they'd be subject to whatever operations and maintenance were in place when they were permitted.
I think what I'm thinking is like, we could go down to 400 square feet and then put a depth on it or something like that. But I think I'd also want to say that, I just want to say natural ponds or ponds that had been, or, you know, man-made ponds or whatever the word is that had been in place for like, you know, in place and unmaintained for like a pretty long time, you know, like 20 years, 10, 20 years or something like that. You know, so
Well, man-made ponds that aren't impervious are considered ponds,
right.
right? I think that's what I just read.
Yeah, over 10,000 square feet.
Right.
And so I'm saying like to go down more, we'd say if they are man-made, if they are man-made, then we won't, and if they're small like that, then we won't regulate them unless they have been maintained in a long period of time and become part of a landscape. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
I'm going through a rabbit hole of trying to find who's supposed to maintain it. no documentation.
Are you still on stormwater systems or are you on these ponds?
On
Okay. Yeah,
maintaining.
two different things.
It's man-made.
But it's a detention basin. It was built to be a stormwater structure versus a pond that was built to be a pond.
Okay.
Yeah, stormwater basins are in a
Yeah.
separate set of, separate area of the regulations.
I'm just trying to picture under a quarter acre size pond that wasn't man-made that we would be considering trying to have jurisdiction over, like Kansas had to.
Or that was man-made. I don't know, are there fire ponds in Easthampton?
I think we own one up on, the side of Mount Tom. I'm not that I'm thinking about that in particular, but I'm just as an example, like up, in the Borchowski Conservation Area, there is a fire pond up there that's real small, has not been maintained in ages. It's actually in the blowdown area, so I don't know if you could get there now, you know.
So why, what would a man-made pervious pond look like, Dan, that wouldn't have been built into a stream or groundwater that would have been jurisdictional already?
That one, for example, you know,
So how is it maintained? I mean, what's keeping it a pond?
it's probably just groundwater.
Groundwater spring fed.
Yeah, as far as I know,
So why wasn't it spring fed before it was man-made?
because I think they dug
They
it
dug it
out.
out,
It might have just been a stream coming down.
just a stream, run out from the mountain and they dug it out.
Yeah, or they just dug it deep enough that it intercepted groundwater.
Right.
And I think that's like a perfect example because it might be under 10,000 square feet. It hasn't been maintained in a long time. It's part of
not a
the
stream
natural
anymore.
landscape now, so we would want to regulate it probably. But if it was at somebody's house, you know, and on their property and being maintained continuously, then we probably wouldn't want to regulate it if they constructed it, unless it had been there so long without anybody touching it that it was full of, creatures.
Has some other city hit this target already and tried to?
Not
No,
this
a lot
under
of-
stipulation.
A lot of towns that we looked at have used the MAC ponds of any size.
Yep.
Yeah.
So they don't set a minimum size.
Correct.
Yeah, which I could imagine getting in horrendous fights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I could also imagine getting into fights though over what constitutes maintenance and maintained or unmaintained, and that's just like a slippery, complicated slope to go down.
I also just wonder in terms of if we're gonna try to get this passed through the town and through the city council, if we should pick our battles. This is really one of them. Or maybe we don't think it will be any battles, but
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe there might be one or two edge, I can't think of any in particular, but we might, if we implement this ordinance, we might come up with an edge case somewhere where we end up getting into some battle, but I think something like that. I'm not saying that what I'm proposing is like anything that I'm gonna be like, planting my flag here, but I'm just saying like that kind of thing, would at least help make it easier to figure out what we meant when we cared about ponds,
And 400 square feet would be something that was like maybe 2/3 the size of this room.
20 feet by 20 feet or
By
whatever.
20.
Yeah, pretty small. So, it might pick up a bunch of different little water bodies, but, again, if it's like somebody's yard.
Is your thought maybe that trying to cover things that are functioning as vernal pools, like would this somehow overlap with the vernal pool protections, or no? This is different because it's
No.
man-made and.
Because ponds by definition are your full are holding water except during periods of extended drought.
I see. Okay.
So they're wet all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I see.
People seem to care about them a lot in Easthampton, even when they're not on their own property. See a lot about them.
Although most, well, the examples I can think of have all been more that we've run up against.
Yeah, the Highland Ave one, I don't
remember that one. I don't know if that was before me.
It was around probably 2011.
Yeah, it was probably bigger than 400 square feet though, right?
Yeah, and it was had water in it, as far as I understood, like most of the time.
Forever.
Yeah,
I'm gonna pull it up on the Mass Mapper or something. I see it.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So it still shows up somewhere.
I see.
In
So what-
history, it'll show up.
If somebody was gonna build a pond in their yard,
Mhm.
what are the chances that they wouldn't have a liner?
Unless it was for livestock or something like that, that wouldn't be, you know, it was in the yard, they're gonna put a liner just to be able to control it, right?
I think probably in
Otherwise,
most
it's
cases.
just gonna grow in and take over with everything.
But what if there already was a pond? They wanted to build a building for a pond.
Yeah, I don't know. I grew up in a strange spot where my brothers and I would just go out in the woods and dig a hole and we have a pond anywhere we wanted.
With shovels, with,
Yeah, we only had to go down about 2.5 to 3 feet.
and
For swimming.
400 square feet?
Well, that would have been quite an operation.
Yeah, that sounds like quite an
Beyond our
operation.
ambitions.
So we're not trying to,
But there are places on planet Earth where groundwater is
Test pits.
high and you can make your own pond pretty easily
Right.
without
That
lining
was like
it.
these.
but if the
Yeah.
groundwater is that high, well, I guess a couple feet, you're not gonna hit wetland. You're not gonna be in a wetland already, but I'm just trying to think of how you would create a pond and keep it wet without a liner or already being in a wetland resource
Right,
area.
Yeah,
It seems like
Or a
it's
stream running through
most
your
likely gonna be
backyard.
one of
that
those
you're-
two things,
you're
right? That you're
digging
damming up, in
yeah.
which case
You're
already in a
separate
wetland
problem,
resource
yeah.
area.
Right.
Would it make sense to specify on Mount Tom? Like things like that. Like, are there anywhere else? I guess there's this Highland Ave one that maybe is a thing, but I wonder if,
So if somebody, let's say somebody had a piece of land and the people before them had a livestock pond. And then they came along and they said, we want to fill in the pond because we want to build something. Would we be okay with them just filling in the pond?
Well,
If it was 400
exactly
square
what-
feet?
how it happened on.
That's what the Highland Ave was.
Yeah,
Right.
Can you zoom in?
which property was it? Is it known? Like,
Well, it was up on the south side of Highland,
yeah,
in the field, just near the edge of the woods, or in the woods a little bit.
yeah. I'm not trying to speak to motivation in that case, but it was.
That was just an example.
There was a pond in an agricultural field and the property owner was like filling it in,
Drained it,
filled it in.
here we go.
filled it in.
Okay.
This
Yeah,
guy right here.
residents, the butters were
Yeah, that
mad
looks like it.
and,
Can you zoom in?
but it was within his
But you-
ability to do so. Yeah, there it is.
That looks like it.
Reference of million
Right,
watermarks.
because
This is
it
from
was like
images from
what?
2001.
Okay.
Yep.
And then let's see, you think it happened in like 2011?
That's a,
So-
that's a pretty
That's
good,
how I remember it.
yeah, that's a pretty good.
So it's no longer a pond.
that was
Indeed,
good.
it's gone.
Yeah.
The website is great. I like the
Magic.
website. Yeah.
It's like magic.
2010, it wasn't there.
And we had DP, and DP was involved, we did site visits, and we're just like, it just wasn't a regulated pond, you know? And like, I don't know.
And did it? So, okay, let's go back to what we're here for. Did it meet the interests of the act? Or was it just something that people were attached to?
There was some attachment to it. There was some emotional attachment to it. It wasn't connected to anything, right? It wasn't connected
Did it provide ecosystem services
frogs and turtles and things like that.
that would create resilience
Sure.
against climate change?
Well, yeah, so our,
Sure.
our,
We had
guess
we had that
interest
climate
in
change in 2011.
Oh, yeah, we did.
Not as bad as we do now.
It probably wasn't doing anything for flood control or storm damage
No.
prevention
No.
or public and private water supply, groundwater supply.
Are you looking at what our proposed updated functions and values are?
No, I'm just looking at the interest of the act. I forgot we had that.
So I don't know if that changes anything.
But it sounds like wildlife habitat, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we added, based on, I think primarily from the model ordinance, we added protection of rare species and rare species habitat, protection of agriculture and aquaculture, protection of recreation values being important to the community, and protection of ecosystem services that contribute to climate change resiliency.
Yeah, they had an option of putting something in there related to aesthetics, but they cautioned against doing anything related to aesthetics.
Yeah,
I've gone
We vetoed that.
down with aesthetics in another town on one of my work projects, and it was not pretty
yeah,
for anybody.
yeah.
That's a.
And I
So
We didn't want to have that. We don't want to have that.
Yeah.
So Highland Ave would have been protection of aquaculture.
No, that would not be aquaculture.
What qualifies as aquaculture?
Aquaculture is like
Fish
growing fish.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's what, sure.
So Cassie, did it say what size that pond was?
Well,
Do you have any
we
idea?
can see if we can figure it out. So let's see here.
I'm sure there's a file in there
So
somewhere.
there is a,
So what's the-
looks like it's 100, not quite 100 feet across. Using this little scale there.
Fairly large. So what would be the downside? What's the negative case where we would regret having a 400 square foot pond threshold? Swimming pools are already
Okay.
exempted, and presumably they're not pervious, one hopes. The swimming pools are specifically not ponds under the WPA.
I don't know, if
Thankfully.
there was an artificial pond with a clay liner, not like a plastic liner, but a clay liner that had been left untouched for 20 years, then I don't think anybody would know the difference between that and
Gotcha.
one that didn't have a liner or whatever, I don't know. Again, I don't know. I'm not thinking about particular cases. I don't know if there are any of those around, but
And what would the problem be there?
that we would probably want to think about regulating it.
Well, if it was a clay liner and it was 20 years old, you'd have broken down sediment on top that would become new organics that would, you'd never even know there was a clay liner. So it would just be things would be growing in it.
Yeah. Same with the plastic liner too.
If you just let it go, it's gonna be,
Yeah.
organics are gonna pile up on top of it over the years.
It's not potentially already captured by an isolated, it's not, well, maybe become an isolated vegetative wetland at some point. Because that, we do expand our jurisdiction to include isolated vegetative wetlands. Yeah, but I don't know if that's the same, it's not
Well,
as a pond.
definitely ruin it.
I'm just trying to think if there, I don't know.
So it seems like we're leaning towards using a 400 square foot threshold.
I just cut up that number. So. That's an easy one.
How about 1,000 foot? I don't know, 400 just seems really small to me. I'm sort of trying to strike some, I mean,
Oh, the size of this room.
Yeah.
Roughly 400.
I think 400.
you go over 400.
If it's, if it serves its purpose.
How about if we start with 400 and see if we can push back and be willing to be flexible on it? Sort of identify where we can be flexible and where we can't.
Yeah, I mean, when was the last time a new regulation was implemented in Easthampton, and do we expect that we would present it to the city council and defend what we came up with or whatever?
Yes.
Couldn't say.
To the stormwater ordinance, it just kind of happened. I wasn't involved in any of that.
I don't know when last time something like this went through, I can ask. But yeah, the process as I understand it is,
Well, the ADUs probably, right? Isn't that a new ordinance?
Couple of years ago.
Was stormwater driven by the state though? Wasn't that kind of a state mandate that we
Yeah.
had to follow
Oh, the
the
MS
state
code.
rules? Yeah.
But, so yeah, maybe ADUs is the most recent one.
Because that's an ordinance now, right?
Yeah.
That's probably the most recent.
Was it hard to get it done?
What else?
Not, so my understanding is what we want to do, we would get as close to a final draft as everybody likes here. Then we would go and take it to all these other boards and committees like Agricultural Commission and Energy Advisory, like whoever we think is appropriate to take it to, get their opinions, and then maybe even do some public outreach and do some public meetings, people come comment on it there. And almost the last step is that you take it to city council.
Yeah.
So you kind of prepare yourself for any
For whatever's
possible
gonna hit.
opposition, yeah.
And we could even pose some of these questions that we're still on the fence about to those boards when we go around
Right,
and get opinions.
True.
So yeah, let's write it in as 400 square feet or greater for now, but keep it flagged, Kathy, as something that we want to kind of keep discussing with folks.
Okay, so just so that I have it settling on for now, but keeping it flagged, 400 square feet of permeable ponds that have not been maintained within a certain amount of time? Are we wanting that?
No, we're just calling it ponds 400 square feet or greater.
Okay.
And the rest of the definition will follow from the WPA.
Just modifying it to that, okay.
I think, right? I think that's what
It's
we
gonna be
agreed on.
hard to put a time frame on things because
Yeah.
we don't know. And
Right.
Oh, right, yeah.
Okay. That's that issue.
Well, I walked through those woods. What did I get to know? I know it.
What's next?
Next, okay, the other one was, pull it up here. Whether the commission wants to extend the 200-foot riverfront area protections
All right.
to include intermittent streams. I believe this is in the jurisdiction section. Good job. Let me see, I'll pull it up here in a second.
Yes, in the jurisdiction.
I cannot find that.
That's a simple page.
Yes, okay, so yeah, second page,
I'm in a different version.
fourth bullet. So there's a note here on MXCC, I can read if you like.
Well, I don't think we need to read the note yet. So we kind of went round and round with this one too, thinking that, thinking about some of the cases of intermittent streams and what it would mean to have a 200-foot riverfront on those versus just the 100-foot buffer and the extra regulations that come with that. And I believe that we as a subcommittee were leaning towards thinking that would be pushing it in a lot of cases and not necessarily make sense.
that would benefit
Yeah.
because we have so much water. around here.
We're actually just 2 bullets down below where we just were on the note thing. Sorry. I was having the same problem.
Sorry.
You know,
That's what
I
had there.
have an intermittent stream in my backyard that runs off of the back of Mount Tom. And if you made it 200 feet, that would be my whole yard. I could never do anything on the yard ever again.
Well, that's not true because that's not how riverfront works. Riverfront is different from the others in that it has a whole different and more complicated suite of performance standards.
So it's not that you wouldn't be able to do anything in that area, but it is more complicated and it's probably, I don't know if it's appropriate to say some of the harsher performance standards in any other jurisdictional area. Does that make sense? Is that a way to say it or just complicated?
They're more complicated. I don't know if they're harsher.
Okay.
It's just,
But
they're
it's already
totally
made-
different.
If it's already maintained lawn, then it's a non-issue anyways, right?
Right.
Most part.
And the thing about Mount Tom is that there's a lot of like drainage ways that come down
definitely.
it without any DPW, like, so they would, even then, they wouldn't necessarily have this.
They would in our revision. Because I
Yes.
think we added a line to include resources without upgradient BBW.
Yep, let's see where that is.
So that would deal with, for example, our situation at the 93 Northampton
Yep.
enforcement order, where until we located the BBW in that field that had been delineated originally, there was no upgraded resource area. And so the bank and the stream down gradient didn't count.
Okay.
So we wanted to make sure that those would count even if you didn't have the upgradient BPW.
Where do we have that in here? Is that under, I want to make sure that is in here, because we don't have a definition, in the definitions, we don't have intermittent stream, but I remember that was like a key point of it. I just want to make sure it's here, because we have it for IBWs, certainly. That might be something that needs to be stipulated still.
I'm not sure where we added it.
Because I would have expected to see it under jurisdiction for intermittent bullet relating to intermittent streams, just right above perennial. And then, or in the definition, we don't have a separate definition for intermittent stream. Well, I can make sure that's in there, I suppose.
I had like 3 different versions.
Yeah.
We were going to add it. In the bullet between the two we've been talking about, where it says any intermittent streams, brooks, creeks, and springs. And wait,
Whether perennial or intermittent.
these are, which one is the more recent? Okay. I've got different language here.
Oh, I have in here that we just have a note that said add, including those upgrading to BBW. I don't know why
Yeah,
I didn't include that. Sorry, I will put that in there.
right. I think this is my more recent version, because I'm reading out the wrong one.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, and then the last one, that last bullet that says said resource areas shall be protected whether or not. No, hang on. I think that's where we were, I think we're gonna put it there too. Said resource areas shall be protected whether or not they border surface waters and shall be inclusive of streams of gradient and BPW was one of the things we had discussed adding there. But to your point, Dan, it would capture those streams on Mount Tom.
With the 200 foot, we've captured it already in the intermittent definition, intermittent stream definition, that they would get the intermittent stream protections, which includes the 100 foot buffer zone. If we implemented this 200 foot protection, we would be applying the riverfront area protections to those streams coming off Mount Tom and then all other streams.
And so one other thing we tossed around as an idea was to use the 100 foot buffer, but potentially also a 25 foot or greater no disturb zone to be potentially at the discretion of the commission based on the qualities of that resource. And because we were also trying to, like, we didn't want to have a drainage ditch with a 200 foot riverfront area, right? Because that doesn't make sense to anybody. And it may not even make sense to have a 25 foot no disturb zone around a drainage ditch. So that's why we kind of wanted to put that at the discretion of the commission, so that if there were actual interests of the act being provided or protected through protecting that resource with a buffer or with a no disturb, that we could apply it. But if it clearly was just like a ditch through grass, we didn't need to worry about it. So we were trying to give that kind of flexibility.
So just to clarify, right now, the intermittent streams under the Mass Wetland Protection Act don't have any protection.
Only if they don't have upgradient wetlands. So like springs that come off Mount Tom and there's no wetlands around, bordering vegetated wetlands around them, it does not become jurisdictional until it hits a BBW. That's my understanding.
Right.
So there have been instances where the commission has reviewed permits and determined that they don't have jurisdiction.
Right.
Because it's just a little stream. But regular intermittent streams do have protections. Currently, the 100 foot buffer zone is associated with them. And
Even if there's no hydrological connection.
Even if
No,
there's,
the stream is the hydrologic connection.
yeah, that is the connection, so. So as long as you got a BVW and then a stream, that whole intermittent stream is protected under the Wetlands Protection Act and it's jurisdictional admission. Yeah. But if you have gradient, no.
How often is that determined?
Well, we've had a couple instances where there were non-jurisdictional streams, typically coming off of Mount Tom.
And why did you guys as a subcommittee think 200 feet would be more important than 100?
We thought 100 foot made more sense.
Oh, okay. Only for 100 foot with a 25 foot no disturbance.
Other thoughts?
Cassie, did you get something in the chat? I thought I saw something come through.
Oh, sorry. Oh, Garrett Stover, it's appropriate. He says, not sure if it's appropriate to comment, please ignore. If not, a major issue seems to be that current definition of permanent stream is highly dependent on outdated maps or stringent requirements generated from geology not applicable to Easthampton. The standards don't reflect contemporary changes in rain events and or impervious surface expansion over past few decades. Last point, perhaps aimed towards biological and stormwater function of these waterways.
So if most of what we're talking about as the town of Easthampton refers to intermittent streams on Mount Tom.
I don't think that's necessarily
that's not
true.
the case.
No, it's more,
That's where we probably run into it more often, right?
Right.
yeah, if the commission were to expand the riverfront area protections to intermittent streams, that would have major implications for many projects in terms of most projects would likely probably try to avoid doing work within them. They wouldn't have to, but they probably would. That's something that I've seen typically is projects try to stay out of it. Not in the same way that the buffer zone is usually more common for projects to be more willing to propose work within the 100-foot buffer zone.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all.
And keep in mind too that we haven't gotten to any discussion of performance standards we might want to add to intermittent streams themselves, which is something that would come in the regulations. We're just trying to figure out, do we want that riverfront buffer on them or that riverfront area around them? Because we can and intend to have the buffer zone be treated as a resource area in its own right so that it could have its own performance standards and we could have some control over what you can and cannot do within even that 100-foot buffer beyond what we currently are able to control, which is not that much.
So you're saying not necessarily just blanket apply the RFA riverfront area standards, but rather tailor our own potentially to the 100 to intermittent streams and their associated buffer. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm saying don't just assume that the buffer zone as it currently is defined is what would be in place if we go this route. It's more the question of, does it make sense to have the riverfront area apply to intermittent streams broadly across the board? Or do we want to have the buffer zone apply and then think about how we want to set performance standards for the buffer zone?
I'm getting hung up on something right now, and that's where we talk about, just like starting out when we talk about jurisdiction in the opening paragraph.
Yeah.
Except if permitted by the Conservation Commission, no person shall commence to remove, build, grade, to build upon, degrade, discharge, or otherwise in the following resource areas. And then so for the first bullet, any vegetated wetlands, including without equivalent to wetlands, wildering wetlands, soft box, shrubs, seasonal wetlands, isolated wetlands, etc., or within 100 feet of said area known as the 100-foot buffer zone. So we're saying, so the Wetlands Protection Act has language that says areas subject to protection, and it lists the areas. But then the buffer zone is where we, review permits. But this makes it sound like we're treating the resource area and the buffer zone to the same level of protection. Where so it's like basically make 100-foot no disturb area.
Not no disturb, but it'll have its own performance standards as all of the other resource areas do.
Yeah, like currently, if you work in the buffer zone, the only performance standard is that the commission needs to review to make sure that it won't result, the work proposed there won't result in impacts to BBW or any other jurisdiction area below. But if we include this language as it is presented here, we could create performance standards that be met to do work in the buffer zone that are more explicit.
I see, so that is the intent.
Yeah, and that's recommended in the MAC model ordinance. We see that in place in lots of other towns. And honestly, I haven't gotten deep enough into looking at what the performance standards are for that buffer zone yet to know what sort of things people are doing, but the intent is to treat it as its own resource area.
And those performance standards would be in the,
The regs.
I think we want that in the ordinance to take it out of our
That is not how the models are set up.
interest.
And I think it's because the regulations are more, it's not the same process to amend the regulation, so it's a little more, I don't know, you say nimble in the regulations, so if there's like, needs to be changed, I don't really know, it's a good question, I'm not sure. I can check to see how it's done, I have some stats here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would think regulating areas would be something that should be a bigger public discourse and approval, you know, kind of taken out of our, you know, like that's a decision to make at the city, like this is what we want the city to be level, you know, that's my opinion on that, I guess.
So you want all of the performance standards built into the ordinance?
I think so. So that policy for the city of Easthampton is set by, you know, city council, you know, at that level, with input from the planning board, because of, you know, that's kind of how I feel it should be, so that the vision of the city couldn't be held up by the Conservation Commission, should the membership be, you know, particularly focused on one direction or another.
Why do you think other towns are not doing it that way? Do you have a reason for that?
The usual reason that you separate the ordinance and the regulations is because it's much easier to amend the regulations if you need to change something.
I see.
And so, I mean, to my way of thinking with the performance standards, if, you know, if we say we want to set a 25-foot no disturb zone in our buffer zone, and then, you know, 3 years from now, we decide, oh man, like it really seems like 50 would be more effective,
Right.
or vice versa. You don't have to go back to city council and through a whole hoopla to be able to change that.
Yeah. But if you get a commission that comes in and 3 out of 5 members say, we don't think anybody should build within 100 feet of, you know, the resource areas, we're gonna change the regulations to do that. Then it's done with that, you know, that's it.
Not a lot of input.
I think, I don't know what happened. I think that stuff like that is what happened last time that we had a bylaw, you know, and the city was like, all right, take your bylaw away, you know, kicking everybody off the Conservation Commission, replacing everybody or whatever, 1999 or 2000, whatever that was, you know, and like, I don't know.
Well, to get back to what you said earlier, Chelsea, about do you think that people actively would avoid trying to develop if there was 200 feet versus 100 feet?
If it was the 200-foot riverfront area,
Right.
performance standards were applied.
But it sounds like even if we created, even if it was 100 feet, if we're gonna change the language around what is or isn't allowed in 100 feet, what we're regulating and what we're not doing, that seems more important to me, whether it's 100 feet or 2. Because maybe the reason that you're avoiding developing isn't square footage, but how much is built into the riverfront standards versus the buffer.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like it would be important to, whatever the performance standards are, would probably dictate the level of how people would try to develop within them or not, I suppose. Does that make sense to say it that way?
Yeah. To me, it does.
It would be important to whatever is in the performance standards
Would give more teeth to the commission one way or another. And of course, what happens to people? Oh.
Do you have any consensus on whether riverfront should apply to intermittent?
I'm just concerned that it might just take away, too much buildable property. And then we're gonna run into problems, people saying, no way, I wouldn't be able to do these 9 projects if you had that rule in place, or so we'll get pushed back on it.
Yeah, I guess to me, it seems like if right now we have a 100-foot buffer zone, but people can still sort of build within it, and they just have to do whatever they need to do to be able to do that. It doesn't really protect. It doesn't offer that much protection to the wetlands.
No, buffer zone is not currently a resource area.
Right. But if it were, we considered that to be more a no disturbance zone, then, but we don't make it 200 feet, then people might be more, people in the town might be more behind that, because it wouldn't take away so much buildable area, and it would add more protection around.
But if you make it a 100-foot no disturb area right now, just think of the projects that we'd be banging into that, it would be a
But
problem.
I don't think a 100-foot no disturb zone would be appropriate in most cases. Maybe it's something like, if it's existing forest, there's different restrictions
Okay.
on what you can take down versus if it's already a cleared area, then you can go up to 25 feet or something. I mean, it could be, we need to figure out what those are
Right,
so that we're,
not making so restricted that
right,
no one's gonna wanna sign up for this.
right.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily saying we should have 100-foot no disturbance zone. I'm
Okay.
just saying if we have more protection built into the 100 feet, we don't need to make it 200. Okay. I'm gonna stop talking.
Yeah, and like for me, it's the problems that we seem to have are these, resource areas that are on the edge of being resource areas, and maybe they are, maybe they aren't. We can't tell, And even when it comes to riverfront area, oftentimes, somebody comes to us with something, pretty de minimis, and we're like kind of scratching our head, looking for ways to, help out, decks, decks in existing lawn and different things. So, I guess I don't know. I'm trying to think for past examples of times when we've been like, we really would like to have had a higher level of protection for in a buffer zone area. And I'm just not coming up with it for the same way that I'm coming up with examples of when we really would have liked to have been protecting, something look like a stream or something look like a pond or something look like a isolated vegetative wetland or something like that.
Well, I think we've actually gotten into it quite a few times because we've asked people to do 25-foot or 50-foot, disturb zones in buffers and back their project up a bit. And we don't currently, we're mostly relying on their goodwill to agree to that because we don't have the authority to really regulate the buffer zone in that way. But we've done that on a number of projects. We've done it on solar projects. We did it at the school. We've done it around slopes.
Yeah.
So we definitely do look to have some more protection of the buffer zones so that you aren't going right up to the wetland edge.
Yep.
Maybe one thing to consider is that if you were to apply the 200-foot riverfront area performance standards to all intermittent streams, that would include potential requirements for alternative analyses. It would include that 10% amount of, I can't remember what I feel foolish, I can't remember what it is, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to maintain a certain 10% of amount. There's other like explicit performance standards that are included in the riverfront area, 200-foot riverfront area standards. That is it appropriate? Does the commission think that that is within the best interest of supporting the functions and values identified already?
I would say for most intermittent streams, probably not. There are some for which it might be, but I think it's overreaching to put it on all of them.
And you can still change the performance standards without.
Right. Are there different performance standards that the commission would like to see us within the 100 buffer zone that are some kind of middle ground between, maybe not going all the way to all the requirements that the RFA has, but still requiring other considerations such as the a set 25-foot no disturb concern or 50-foot one. And I can try to look for examples of what performance standards other towns have laid out for the buffer zone.
Yeah, I mean, those no disturb zones are pretty common.
Yes.
South Hadley does that, Belchertown does that, a number of towns around us do
I
that.
just didn't know if they had any others for types of performance standards in the
Yeah.
buffer zone beyond that. I'm not sure. Yeah.
So I don't hear anybody really arguing in favor of doing the riverfront area for intermittent streams. Is that accurate?
I think so, yeah. I think so. I don't have an argument to make for it.
Okay. All right, so that answers that. We still have much to figure out on what to do with the buffer zone.
So I'm sorry. Seems like, just so that I have the right notes here, not looking to do the 200-foot RFA for intermittent streams, but
Correct.
have some kind of increased performance standard associated with them to be determined.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, so we're not selecting a no disturb zone? Or,
I don't think we want to deal with that right now.
It's not that we won't do it, it's just that it's not determined yet. We've only determined that the commission does not want to include in the ordinance applying the 200-foot riverfront area performance standards to all intermittent streams. It seems to be that most people are thinking that that might be too prohibitive or I don't know, a hard threshold for people to meet or however you want to say it. But things like no disturbance zone, it sounds like we're going to try to explore that later.
Yeah, I think that needs some more thought. So I will ask folks to think about whether a no disturb zone is something we want to adopt and what size. My inclination is to have, if we feel like it's supportable, to have some discretion in that, because I think intermittent streams can be so variable from literally something that looks and acts like a drainage ditch, probably is a drainage ditch, to something that is a flashy, legit stream that just happens to be intermittent. And I think that there's different protections in order in those two cases. So I would like to be able to be more lenient in places where we don't feel like there's a lot of benefit to having the same size no disturb zone, or maybe it's not even necessary at all. I mean, if you've got a ditch running through somebody's yard and it's already mowed all around it, and they want to do something in that area, I don't know if that's always something that we need to put a no disturb on.
Right.
So I want to have flexibility there.
Jay, do you remember, I feel like last time we went through this, we said, so starting with BBW, I think we said 25-foot no disturb for BBW, and then a 25-foot, like, 25 to 50 feet, like discretionary, commission discretion restrip zone. And then, so I think we had that. I don't know if that's in here, or is there anything that you came across in the reviewing the.
We haven't gotten into the details of what the old
Yeah,
performance standards might have been.
but then doing maybe for bank, so for like an intermittent stream, it'd be looking at a bank delineation, right? So maybe it's just a 50-foot for a bank resource area, 50-foot, no disturbance zone at the commission's discretion or something. 50 feet, or if the commission so chooses, less, no disturbance. I do like BBW, like it's 25-foot, like non-negotiable, maybe with like an exception for stormwater level spreader. Or some, probably a million other things that we can think of, thought about, but.
So it sounds like with those points noted that we want to discuss the details of what the performance standards within the 100-foot buffer zone, such as 25-foot. There's some nuance to that could be used there.
Yeah, I'm just saying what's popping in my
Yeah.
head right
Oh,
now.
no, this is
Yeah.
helpful. I'm taking notes. I'm just thinking like, making myself organized with like what, how detailed we want to go. Oh, did we make a determination of whether or not we would include performance standards and regulations versus the ordinance?
No, we didn't.
I would like them in the ordinance, but I feel pretty strongly about that.
I wonder if he asked ACC why it's usually in the regulations.
What are other thoughts?
And I think it might be worth determining tonight because it has implications of how we go forward in terms of our subcommittee meetings.
So regulations are easier to change than ordinance.
Yeah, I just wouldn't want the Conservation Commission to like set development policy for the entire city without having to consider the consequences other than to the wetlands.
And I suppose certain commissions could go the other way too and they can't reduce the regulations below what the Wetlands Protection Act. No one can do that.
Right.
This can never do that. They can only increase, but in theory, a commission could reduce the regulations established at this time. Yeah.
Anybody?
Can anyone else change the regulations besides the commission?
That's based on who is written into the ordinance as the authority for defining the regulations.
Like, can somebody come along and take away all the power of the conservation commission?
No, that's vested by the state.
But so maybe what would happen with the original ordinance, how did that was repealed. They repealed the city council, or it wasn't city council at that time, I believe it was the town. But they repealed the ordinance, which did take it away.
Yeah.
But I don't know, the circumstances of that fully, how that comes to be. But typically it's the commission would set the regulations, right? Like, do people typically allow that authority to others, like in their ordinance? Like, trying to think who else would be given that authority.
It's usually the most appropriate board that has voting authority, which in this case would be us. I've seen, not for a wetlands ordinance, but I've seen instances for stormwater where kind of like we have shared jurisdiction with planning board, that the stormwater regulations would be jointly defined and voted on by those two boards. I've seen that kind of situation. And maybe, so I guess, I don't know, Dan, if this is what you've seen, but I actually see bylaw or ordinance and regulations most commonly in town government, where part of what you're trying to accomplish is, even if it's the Board of Selectmen being able to adjust the regulations, you're avoiding the fact that you have to wait for town meeting to make changes to anything. Whereas we can make changes by city council vote to things, you know, twice a month or however often they meet. So maybe it's less critical in a city government.
True, weren't there just
Anyways.
amendments made to the stormwater ordinance quite easily? I thought there was some kind of amendment made to the stormwater ordinance, maybe, that seemed to go by me quite quickly and happened.
Nobody asked me. So.
I'm not sure, I have to talk to Dan Rippey about that one. I thought someone mentioned something to me and I was like, huh, and then I forgot until
I
right
don't
now,
know.
but, I'm not sure.
And it may be something that we want to discuss with other boards too, and council.
Yeah, I can try to do a little research of like, how does it work if the performance standards are in the regulations, excuse me, if the performance standards are listed within the ordinance, what's the mechanism for changing them, what has been other ordinance experiences, and then can ask vice versa, would then have performance standards be in the regulations?
Yeah, in my job, I work in weird corners of the regulations that, you know, don't usually deal with, the only thing in, so I don't get into bylaws or ordinances all that often, other than when we have to do like geotechnical test borings in BLSF in a town where there is a bylaw, we have to do a stupid order of conditions for it, whereas it would be exempt if it was a, you know,
Right.
if there was not a bylaw or ordinance. But I haven't really so I've done a ton of projects in Sutton, Mass, so it keeps coming up into my mind as like an example. And like basically they have a bylaw and regulations. I think all their regulations have it at our place. And those kinds of things. But they have weird things in there. They protect buffer zone as resource areas, and then they have a buffer zone off into that.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Let's not go there.
I just ignore that.
This was not on our list of things to discuss because we felt
Right.
pretty confident in it.
Right.
But to the point of the exemptions, in your example of the boring, the only one of the exemptions from the Wetlands Protection Act that we did not carry over was, Kathy, do you remember?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Which was the one exemption that we didn't carry over? I
Oh,
can't
yeah,
see.
I have that. So,
Which was much more inclusive than the MAC model suggested. We
Okay.
thought that there were many more that we wanted to just carry over.
So this is my note in here, is that the new wording, so, which is hopefully more clear, is that the existing exempted minor activities listed in the act do still apply. They're all still exempt, except those exemptions do not still apply for the listed activities C and B with conditions. So in the Wetlands Protection Act, they list out all these minor activities with letters associated with them. That's the nomenclature. And here we thought that C and B should have criteria associated with them. And I think we added.
But what
E.
are they?
So the first one is related to fencing. So the wording that I have here is, minor activity fencing, will not apply provided, or, shall not apply under the ordinance, including the following with added requirements. So B, fencing, provided that it will not constitute a barrier to wildlife movement, stone walls, stacks, or cordwood. This minor activity does not apply under this ordinance unless closed fence is shown to be in compliance with existing local zoning requirements, as well as those listed requirements in the Conservation Commission rules and regulations. And it would make a citation. So that was something that we wanted to stipulate in the regulations, is some kind of special threshold or requirements they must meet if they want the fencing to apply, to the exemption under fencing to still apply.
I think that's no longer an exemption.
Okay.
So we may need to still work on that wording.
Okay.
But what was the other one?
The other
What
one
was
was
C?
vista pruning. So
Oh yeah, that was the one we wanted to pull out.
provided that activity is located more than 50 feet from the mean annual high water line within the riverfront area or from bordering vegetated wetlands, whichever is farther, pruning of landscape areas is not subject to jurisdiction under 310 CMR 10. This minor activity does not apply under this ordinance. So you would not be able to do any vista pruning. It's just saying that's not a listed minor activity anymore that you can claim to be exempt under.
It's not that you couldn't do it, you just have to come before.
You need to get a permit to do this vista pruning. And now people potentially do some vegetation management and argue that it's covered under the vista pruning minor exemption. This would remove that ability.
So, okay, so starting off in this paragraph, other than stating this ordinance, the exceptions, et cetera, and then the second sentence starts off exemption. Are we using exemptions and exceptions, those two words mean the same thing, or are they different from each other?
We need to revisit.
Yeah.
We don't, I just wanted to point out that we brought forward all of the exemptions except for vista pruning.
Yep.
And we did some tweaks to the fencing thing, but I think maybe it should be, I haven't looked at the new.
I also have that we
Wording.
had for minor activity E and N, part 4. Because we were thinking that we wanted to have, for E, it was the conversion of lawn for accessory residential structures. But we wanted a note in there about excluding any application to propose accessory dwelling units. We wanted to make sure the accessory dwelling units were not included in that exemption for conversion of lawn to accessory structures for residential places.
Right. Yeah, so I think it maybe got confusing when we went from having them all listed to having only 4 of them listed. So
Yeah.
I need to review Cassie the
Okay.
new version, see.
Yeah,
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
the way it is now, where we sort of list the exemption and like the performance standards to hit that exemption, it makes it almost like you start thinking, okay, so this is exempt, but then you're like, oh, it's not. So I think it's- yeah.
Like double negatives.
I know it's hard. This is what I was struggling with, was like, what's the
It's a
right way to
tough
word it?
Raising
This is my second
exercise.
staff, but yeah, I totally get what you're saying. So
Yeah.
let me take another look at it, I suppose. What I was trying to do here was, before what we had in there was that,
Before we listed all of, we rewrote all of
Yeah.
them, but then just left out the letter C. And that also seemed confusing, so we were trying to figure out how to kind of streamline it, but I'm not sure that we've gotten there successfully yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm probably drilling down too far then.
Yeah, we don't need to,
Okay.
we don't need to sort that
I
out.
know, but it's-
I just wanted to point out that we brought forward all of those exemptions around utility replacement
Yeah.
and borings and all that stuff.
I would think we'd want to, on N4 though, removal of shrubbery for visibility of road signs and signals, I would think we'd still want that to be.
So the stipulation is that this minor activity does apply under the ordinance, but specifically excludes the option to chip and spread the invasive material if it includes Japanese knotweed or other invasive species known to be exacerbated through spreading or of any of its plant material. So because in here, as it's written in the act, that exemption, they're allowed to chip it and spread it on site. And
Yeah, we
there was
just
a
wanted to
concern
avoid
about
that, but
not.
again, this is,
You
we
can just
haven't hit on the clear way to present this.
Yes,
That should
okay,
just
okay.
be a separate rule. No chipping and spreading of any invasive species.
It's interesting.
All right.
All right, what was the third?
Oh, third question?
Yeah,
Yeah, third question was, whether we want to keep the definition of bank as proposed. And
Where's that?
that is going to be, hold on. Definitions, excuse me, I'm on page, not on the page number.
We don't have page numbers anyways.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm making it.
Page 5.
Definitions.
Yes, and then definition of bank as proposed is, oh yeah, okay, so the thing with this is there was a question about,
Which comment number are we?
this is comment number,
CT 16.
What kind of comment number?
Cassie Traeger 16.
it starts with, seems like this change
Oh, there it
would.
is.
So the question was switching between that word higher or whichever is higher or lower. Remember, we were like a little confused. Well, I think we settled on higher being the right wording for the bank because it seemed to make more sense for Easthampton in particular. Because we would like whichever is higher to be considered so that we try to capture those big slopes. I don't know.
I've been reading this language for like 17 years and I still can't figure out what a break in a slope is personally.
Change it sharply.
Would change sharply going this way or going that way?
Well, typically for a bank, it's coming up, out, and leveling off.
Uh-huh.
So if you're looking for bank full width, you're looking for where you've got, banks and then your floodplain.
Mhm. Yeah, nobody ever delineates it up here though.
Well, that's because in the Wetlands Protection Act, it says that it is either the mean annual flood level or the first break in slope, whichever is lower. And the model ordinance, I think, has it as higher.
I believe that's correct.
And we said, I wonder why they did that. And then we started thinking it through, and that adds in your like deep gully bank to become bank, which given the issues that we have with steep slopes and all of the erosion in Easthampton, seems like it might be a worthwhile change.
So that
So
would bring
it's
the
one
bank
word,
up
but it would, it
20,
brings,
30 feet in some
Right.
cases.
and then that's going to also change where your horizontal offset is for your buffer zone or your no disturb, whatever we wind up turning that into. So it sort of effectively becomes a steep slopes protection. And in streams that don't have steep slopes, it's going to be your same. I mean, often mean annual high water and your first break and slope are coincident. If you're in a normal, not deeply incised slope or stream.
Down and higher.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. I just hate that language.
We can try to change it in some way that makes more sense.
Who just pass an ordinance for steep slopes?
There has been discussion of that for years, and I don't think it's ever gone anywhere. And this actually, it would only capture steep slopes leading down to a stream. It wouldn't capture like just the steep slope on Mount Tom, right? So it doesn't actually solve that whole problem, but it would get at the bank erosion issues that we have above resource areas. So for example, again, going back to the enforcement order at 93 Northampton, all of the discussion about which part of that slope from the impacted areas that were the isolated wetlands down to the stream at the bottom. Right now, that whole area in between is nothing. Because the mean high water is down here. So this would say that we're considering it bank up to that break and slope where it levels off. That's where this would apply in those deep gullies. But like the place where they had to build the living wall because the whole thing collapsed.
Yeah.
I don't think it would apply there because I think there you had, is that Brickyard approach or no?
It was a branch of the Manhattan.
Manhattan, yeah.
Manhattan North, I think maybe?
I was gonna say Broad Brook, but that's not right
Yeah, I was
either.
mis-
But whatever it
misreading
is, you've got, I think there you had the brook, a small floodplain, and then that crazy slope that collapsed. So it wouldn't apply there because your break and slope would be onto that floodplain.
Right where they were, that was like river.
Okay, so maybe it would. I wasn't actually
Yeah,
out of
it
my
might
sight
There's
to
no,
see
there's
it,
no flat at all, it's all caved
Okay.
in. It's just
Yeah.
so maybe it would.
Yeah, so that's a tough one.
Bank used to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's true, the roads change.
And maybe there's a different, better way to get at this, and we leave the definition as it was and try to deal with that steep slope in a different way, but
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, as it is in, yeah, the MACC model does use the word higher. But yeah, there's another way to do it.
Lots of ways, to the whole slope.
Hard.
Alright, well, anyway, I see what you're saying here. There's a logic to it, and it makes sense to protect those areas.
So leaning towards maybe different language, but generally we like the higher.
Yes. Yes,
It's like nodding, yeah, okay.
we like to protect those steep slopes leading down to resource areas.
Okay.
And, you know, if, as we so choose, extending protected no disturb areas from the tops of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Great. Those were our main questions for tonight's discussion. It is 8:30. So I recommend, unless folks have read this and have other pressing comments to make, I will recommend that you take it with you and read it and bring any pressing comments next time.
And we have our subcommittee meeting, I think it's
March 6th.
March 6th.
Yeah.
Motion to adjourn.
Have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, Carr? Butcher?
Aye.
August? Weeks?
Aye.
Whittemore?
Aye.
Ryan?
Aye.
Motion carries. It is 8:33. We are closing this meeting of the Easthampton Conservation Commission. Our next meeting will be March 13th at 6 p.m.
And stopping the recording now.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.